The summer of 1944 climaxed for the 436 Troop Carrier Group with a 5-day period flying intense combat missions during Operation Market Garden. The two airborne divisions that fought so hard in Normandy, the 82nd and 101st, were now fighting equally as hard in Holland. However, another airborne division, the 17th Airborne Division, had arrived in England in August 1944, making Chiseldon Camp near Ogbourne St George their home. Their requirement for training kept the troop carrier groups busy either paradropping or towing gliders. One technique that had not yet been used in combat was the practice of a double tow, where each C-47 would tow two CG-4A gliders. This technique doubled the amount of men and equipment that could be flown into combat, which would be put to good effect in March 1945 during Operation Varsity. This footage, found in the US National Archives and Records Administration, is extremely rare footage of the 436 Troop Carrier Group conducting a practice double glider tow from Membury Airfield.
This audio is read from a book called Green Light, A Troop Carrier Squadron's War from Normandy to the Rhine by Martin Wolf. Wolf himself was a radio operator in the 81st Troop Carrier Squadron throughout the war. In Green Light, Wolf tells the story of another organisation in an earlier war whose activities never received much publicity and yet had a great impact on various combat operations. During World War II, the 81st Troop Carrier Squadron, as its name implies, carried and dropped paratroopers onto the battlefield, often in the face of heavy enemy fire. Despite sometimes suffering heavy losses in hazardous conditions and carrying out a demanding job, the 81st never wavered. This book relates the exploits of the 81st, which mirror the combat experience of all World War II troop carrier units.
Of all the extraordinary features of airborne warfare in the Second World War, having one C-47 pull two Wacos, each almost as big as itself, seems the most dangerous. But it was something we, in the 81st Troop Carrier Squadron, had practiced many times in fact. We had first tried it out in Laurinburg-Maxton during the fall of 1943. We knew that having one glider tow rope shorter than the other, given good pilots, the absence of too much air turbulence, a bit of luck, would help prevent mid-air entanglements. But apart from one disastrous attempt in Burma, double tows in combat were unknown. Lifting two loaded gliders off the ground was desperately hard and dangerous work for airplane pilots. One of them described it to me as like trying to climb up a waterfall with your bare hands. The 436 was the first outfit to try flying Waco's double tow. This was in Laurinburg-Maxton. We tried lots of things when we were there in North Carolina. We tried flying 3 gliders behind B-17s. We even tried flying a glider behind a PBY amphibious plane. And I remember we tried out a glider tow behind a fighter plane, a P-38. We tried to see if we could carry paratroopers in a plane that was towing a glider also loaded with paratroopers. We even jumped paratroopers out of gliders, but quite a few of them were badly hurt, and this was soon stopped. No amount of improved preparations, however, could make us forget that getting all those double tow planes and gliders up into the air without collisions would require enormous skill, hard work and good luck on everybody's part. Around the gliders, the vastly increased prop wash stirred up by all those planes straining to pull 2 gliders would be so dangerous that both co-pilot and pilot would have to exert all their strength to keep the glider from turning right over. 2 pilots would have to fight much harder against being swayed from side to side by their double burdens. Merely getting their planes into the air before reaching the end of the runway, especially for the first planes in line, would be an accomplishment in itself. Varsity, like Neptune and Market Garden, had also called for delivering 2 divisions by air, but over 2 or 3 days. Number one concern of Varsity planners, therefore, was that by delivering everything at once, they faced a traffic problem of gigantic proportions. The armada they proposed to put up, more than 1,550 planes and 1,300 gliders, was going to be crowded together into a very tight air corridor. All these planes and gliders had to arrive at invasion sites in the most rigorously orchestrated sequence. Therefore, everything depended on each branch of the troop carrier doing its job perfectly and on schedule. The ground crews, for example, would have to meet the most exacting timetables for getting planes and gliders into shape and into position. The operation also was totally dependent on the most demanding sort of formation flying ever imposed on troop carrier pilots. From tip to tail, Varsity, once airborne, would measure more than 200 miles. It would also be very densely packed from side to side. They arranged the aircraft in parallel lanes, 3 abreast, plus a 4th flying above the other 3. British converted Stirling and Halifax bombers towing Horsers and Hamlickers, Dakotas, British C-47s tugging Horsers, C-47s carrying British paratroopers, C-47s carrying American paratroopers, and C-47s towing either 1 or 2 Wacos. The Varsity Armada would be heading for DZs and LZs just north of the Rhine town of Wesel, some 50 miles upstream from Arnhem. It would be ferrying the British 6th Airborne Division from fields in southeastern England and the American 17th Air Division from several fields in France. All of Troop Carrier Command's 50th and 53rd Wings would be committed to carrying the 17th Airborne. Part of the 52nd Troop Carrier Wing would also be needed to ferry the 17th Airborne. The remaining groups in the 52nd Troop Carrier Wing would be loaned to the British, where they would help the RAF's 38 and 46 groups transport the British 6th Airborne. The DZs and LZs in Varsity were all within 5 miles, for the most part butted up against the western fringe of the key airborne objective. This clump of woods, so close to the Rhine, occupies the only high ground in the region. It was thought to be positively thick with German troops, flak guns and heavier artillery. General Miles Dempsey, commanding the British Second Army, which was to lead the amphibious assault, believed that unless the Allies could silence the artillery in that forest, the Germans, from their protected high ground, could destroy any pontoon bridge British engineers might be able to throw across the river, and no bridge, no tanks.